November or December, somewhere in there. I was actually looking to talk to another person who, her name's Melissa Tucker. I thought she'd be interested in joining, and she's come to some meetings. And as I was talking to her, Lenny kind of stuck his head over the cube and said, I'd like to go, I'd like to come, and he's been coming since then. So just an example of, you never know what's going to happen when you talk to somebody. Just by me going to talk to her, finally, Lenny's like, yeah, I'd like to join. And now he's trying to run for our club president. So see what happens when you just go out of your box and talk to people. You learn a lot of new things. You meet a lot of new people. Lenny's first speech is entitled, Everything You Wanted to Know About Me. It's 4 to 6 minutes. It's the icebreaker. And do you have your, can I see your book to get the objectives? The objectives, please. The objectives of the first speech: to begin speaking before an audience, to discover speaking skills you already have and skills that need some attention. So, without further ado, please welcome Lenny Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmates. Greg, thank you for all that extra pressure that you put on me for doing my very first speech. I really appreciate that. I am here presenting to you my very first speech, and I want to tell everyone about how I wound up in Lansing, Michigan. I started out, I was born on January 12th, 1966 in Monroe, Louisiana. I weighed 9 pounds and 8 ounces when I was born. And as I was practicing my speech with my wife, she said, if I had known that you were that big, we may not have had any kids, because I didn't want any 10-pound babies. My family and I migrated to Dayton, Ohio when I was about 6 months old. We were a part of the great northward migration from the south to come and find jobs in the Midwest in the automobile industry. No one in my family actually worked in the automobile industry, but that we were in that group of people. I grew up with my mom, my stepdad, and 2 brothers. I'm the middle of 3 children. My older brother is 7 years older than me, and my younger brother is 2 years younger than me. So I'm pretty much a good mediator when things come around. If anybody has a problem, they'll call me and say, Lenny, can you solve this problem? My early years were pretty uneventful. I don't really remember much from about kindergarten to about the 5th grade. It was just, I learned to fish, I learned to hunt, I learned to ice skate, I learned to swim all during that time. One of the most significant things that happened to me was when, in the 6th grade, we had forced busing. We were some of the first people in the country to have to do that. So I was bused from my little neighborhood school all the way across town to another school. At that school, it was discovered, hey, this kid is a little bit smarter than other kids that we have, and I was tested and found out instead of going into the 6th grade, I could go into the 7th grade, so I got to skip the 6th grade. And at the time I thought, oh wow, that's gonna be a lot of fun, I'll be able to be with the 7th graders. But looking back on it, I was ready academically, but not socially enough, so that sort of held me back. I didn't quite fit in with the people. One of the things that I did do in that year though, was I won the school spelling bee. And that was my first opportunity to speak publicly. While I was in elementary school, I played basketball for 2 years, which was my first shot at sports. I was bigger, and I was taller than everybody at that time. And so at the end of my 8th grade year, when I went into high school, I went to a pretty unique high school. I went to a vocational cooperative high school called Patterson Cooperative High School. The uniqueness of our high school was it taught you a trade, and in your junior and senior years, you work 2 weeks and you go to school 2 weeks. So I had my first job when I was 15 years old and working full time. I made $3.35 an hour. and I was doing the calculations, and it would have taken me 2 days to get enough money to fill the gas tank in this day and age. While I was in high school, I studied industrial electronics, and I was able to buy a computer, saving up my money from work. And that was my first exposure to computers. I still to this day love to work with computers. And I'm one of those people who was lucky enough one of the few people I think, to study something in high school that would be with me for the rest of my life. After high school, I attended the University of Dayton, where I majored in electrical engineering. I was on the 5-year plan. My year that I missed in elementary school caught up to me in college, because that basically put me back into the same year with everyone else. After college, I took about a 6-month leave from reality, where I just went out and just did whatever I wanted to do, because I had worked from the time been worked or school from the time I was 15 up until I was 22. During part of my stint in a leave from reality, I met my wife, my future wife, in August of 1988. She told me at the time when we were dating, she says, you know what, you have to get a job. You can't just hang out and play all the time. So I got my first position with a company called Richard J. Otero Enterprises, where I was an electrical test engineer. I was an engineer for about 23 months and got laid off with the child on the way. That brings me up to the point where my child was born. And the rest of my life I am going to tell you about in a future speech. As I was working on this speech, I thought, wow, I've done a lot of things, but I can't really tell everybody everything that I did. So I'm going to, on my next speech, which will be on May 19th for anyone who wants to hear the rest of my life, the next piece of my life story, I welcome you to come. Thank you very much for sitting and giving me an opportunity to speak. And thank you very much. Mr. Toastmaster Hall.